Ever find a secret that makes you rethink everything? Well, today we're going deep on something that's well, kind of relatable, but also a little bit awkward. It's about this wife who finds her husband's anonymous confession online. He's basically freaking out about his penis size in their sex life.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's definitely a situation that hits a nerve. I mean, it brings up so many touchy subjects about relationships, like privacy and body image and, of course, communication. And it really makes you think about how to handle those tricky things.
Exactly. So the story comes from this Reddit post where the wife is looking for advice. She found her husband's post in a relationship forum, and she's totally lost about what to do with this info,
Yeah.
especially because it reveals all these deep insecurities that he never told her directly.
Right. And that's what makes it so interesting. The post is like a window into the husband's mind. It shows how, even in relationships that seem happy, people can have these anxieties and doubts that they just don't feel comfortable sharing.
So let's get into the specifics of this Reddit post. Okay, so the wife describes her husband as a great guy, a loving dad, and on the surface, their relationship seems fine. They've been together for a while, have a kid, and she's pretty content with their sex life.
But then the husband's anonymous post tells a totally different story. He's talking about feeling inadequate because of his penis size. He's worried about passing on bad genes if they have a son. And he even admits that he'd rather have sex less often because of his insecurity.
It's kind of sad when you think about it. You see this gap between what he's thinking and her reality. She's happy, but he's stuck in this cycle of putting himself down, and it's affecting his self-esteem and their relationship, even though she has no idea.
It really shows the impact of societal pressure and cultural norms on men and how they see their bodies. We talk a lot about body image issues with women, but men are under so much pressure, too, to fit these ideals. And penis size is a super sensitive topic that can cause a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, it's like there's this unspoken rule about what's normal or desirable, and when guys feel like they don't measure up, it can really hurt their self-worth.
Totally. And it's even worse because guys are often told to just suck it up and not talk about their feelings or ask for help. So they keep all this anxiety bottled up, which leads to shame and feeling alone.
And in this case, it seems like the husband found a way to let it all out on this anonymous online forum. He's reaching out to total strangers, hoping to get some validation and advice, which I get, but it's also kind of worrying, don't you think?
For sure. It shows how much we need safe spaces where men can talk openly about their insecurities without being judged. But it also makes you wonder about the role of these online communities. They can be supportive, but they can also reinforce stereotypes and unrealistic expectations.
Right, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
These online forums can create a sense of community and shared experience, but they can also feed into negative body image ideals and make people compare themselves to others in a way that's not healthy.
Exactly. And it highlights how important it is to be able to think critically and really understand how the media works, especially when it comes to finding information and advice online.
So let's talk about the advice this guy got on Reddit. The responses were all over the place, from jokes to serious relationship advice. Some people said he should tell his wife, while others said that was a terrible idea.
It's fascinating how even in an anonymous space, people react to these situations so differently with varying degrees of empathy and understanding. Some were focused on giving practical solutions, while others emphasized emotional support and communication.
One thing that kept coming up was to avoid a direct confrontation, because it could make him feel even worse. Instead, a lot of people said she should focus on building up his confidence by telling him what she likes about him and, being affectionate.
That approach highlights the power of positive reinforcement in dealing with insecurity. By emphasizing what she appreciates about him both in and out of the bedroom, she could help him challenge his negative self-image and build himself up.
And then the conversation takes a turn into the more intimate stuff. The husband mentioned wanting to be more dominant in bed, which some people saw as a way for him to feel less inadequate.
It's an interesting thought, and it makes you think about how power dynamics and sexual roles can be connected to body image. But you have to be careful and make sure both partners are truly comfortable with that kind of exploration.
Yeah, for sure. It shouldn't be about one person's fantasy at the expense of the other person's feelings. It's about finding ways to connect on a deeper level and maybe address insecurities in a way that feels good and empowering for both people.
It seems like a lot of the Reddit advice was about what the wife could do, but I'm also wondering about what resources are out there for men who are dealing with this stuff on their own.
Yeah, that's a great point. Having a supportive partner is awesome, but it's so important for men to have resources that are made just for them. Actually, there are a good number of organizations and therapists who focus on men's mental health, including body image issues. Have you seen any specific approaches or therapies that work well for helping men get over these kinds of insecurities?
Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can be really effective for challenging those negative thoughts and figuring out better ways to cope. And there are therapists who specialize in body image, so they can offer really personalized support and guidance.
What about support groups? I bet it helps a lot to connect with other guys who've gone through the same thing.
Absolutely. Support groups can be a game changer for guys who feel isolated or embarrassed about what they're going through. It's a safe place to share their stories, learn from each other, and realize they're not alone in this.
This whole situation just shows how important it is to be able to talk openly in a relationship. But I think for a lot of people, bringing up sensitive topics like body image or what's going on in the bedroom can be really scary. Do you have any advice on how to have those conversations in a way that feels safe and productive?
I think one of the most important things is to make sure both people feel heard and respected. That means listening without interrupting, showing empathy, and not judging or criticizing. It can also help to start by telling your partner what you appreciate about them and pointing out their strengths before you gently bring up any concerns.
So instead of jumping right into complaining or saying something needs fixing, you're creating a more positive and supportive vibe.
Exactly. It's about approaching the conversation as a team where you're working together to understand each other's point of view and find solutions that work for both of you.
And I imagine being vulnerable is a big part of it too, right? If one person is willing to open up about their insecurities, it might be easier for the other person to do the same.
Definitely. When we let our partners see that we're not perfect, that we have our own struggles and weaknesses, it can create a much deeper connection and trust. It opens the door for a real and honest conversation.
What about when things get heated? I know these conversations can easily turn into arguments, especially if someone's feeling defensive or insecure.
It's so important to recognize that it's okay to take a break if things start to feel overwhelming or like you're not getting anywhere. Sometimes it's better to walk away to cool down and come back later when you're both in a better headspace.
And I guess getting professional help can be a big help too, right? For working through those tough conversations.
Oh, for sure. A therapist can give couples a safe and neutral space to sort through things and learn to communicate in a healthier way. They can also help people deal with any underlying anxieties or insecurities that might be fueling the problem.
This has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like we've learned a lot about body image and relationships and just how hard it can be to talk about certain things.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, like how society puts pressure on men to look a certain way, the importance of being open and honest in relationships, and how important it is for men to have places where they can talk about their feelings without feeling ashamed.
We also talked about how online communities can be a good thing and a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Like they can be supportive, but they can also make guys feel worse about themselves by pushing stereotypes and unrealistic expectations.
Definitely. It all comes back to being able to think for yourself and not believing everything you see online.
Before we finish up, I want to go back to the ethical part of this Reddit post. You know, the fact that the wife found out about her husband's deepest insecurities by accident through this anonymous confession.
That brings up some really important questions about privacy in the digital age and how we deal with those boundaries in our relationships.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, if you were the wife, would you say something to your husband or try to handle it more subtly? What are the risks and benefits of each approach?
It's a tough one. I mean, open and honest communication is usually seen as the best thing for a relationship. But confronting someone with something they were trying to keep private could feel like a betrayal.
It's a fine line. It really shows how important empathy and understanding are in these situations.
In the end, the best way to handle it really depends on the couple and their personalities.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, and I hope it encourages our listeners to have these conversations in their own lives.
Remember, communication is key, whether it's about your body or sex life or anything else that's bugging you in your relationship.
And if you're struggling, don't be afraid to ask for help. A therapist can be a great resource for figuring out these complicated issues.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into relationships and what it means to be human.
We really appreciate you listening and hope you found this conversation helpful and interesting. And hey, if you did us a favor and subscribe to our podcast, Voices of the Soul, and check out our YouTube channel, Shauna Palage, for more thought-provoking content. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those conversations going.